All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kathy Miles with Cobb Technologies, and we're excited to have each of you, and we appreciate you joining us this morning. You know, we hear a lot today about the importance of AI and cybersecurity, especially when it comes to endpoint security. We've heard our customers, and we understand the importance of establishing security strategies for your network. Whether you're concerned about data breaches or you're just trying to safeguard your business's infrastructure, today's session will provide valuable insights. By the end of today's session, you should have some key takeaways to take with you. We're going to be presenting AI security and understanding new challenges and opportunities, what's next for cybersecurity, and best practices for endpoint security, protecting your network where it matters the most. We know there's going to be a lot of information shared today, so we will be sending links and resources for each of our participants so that you can download, as well as our webinar is being recorded today. And if you would like to take advantage of a free security assessment, we'll be providing information on how to schedule one with us. Cobb Technologies is a power services partner with HP, and we're pleased to introduce Steve Inch, who is the Global Principal Print Security Strategist and Product Management and Marketing Lead at HP. Steve is focused on defining, developing, and executing HP's print security portfolio of solutions and services across all print. He has spent over 28 years in marketing, communications, and product development for leading global technology and manufacturing companies, and we're happy to have him with us as our guest speaker for our webinar today. Steve, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks, Kathy. It's an honor to be here and welcome everybody. As a member of the team at HP back in 2014, we really strove at that moment to put a stake in the ground to get print security into as much of the collective consciousness as possible. And it is an honor for me to share today our latest insights and actionable recommendations to help each of you enhance the security posture of your endpoints across your organizations. Now, with this first slide, as you can see, at Cobb Technologies and HP, we have a deep shared passion for security. Our intensity is expressed in this single phrase, bring it on, in how we think about threats and the threat actors, whether they're a 15-year-old Fortnite guru who moonlights as a hacker from his grandparents' basement to the top-tier state threat actors with unlimited funds from North Korea, China, Russia, and other nation states. So again, we say bring it on. Testament to this intention at HP is really the simple fact that in 2014, we knowingly put a very large target on our backs. We came to market with a substantiated claim of delivering the world's most secure printers, and that is maintained every year to this day and beyond. So but with that claim, we're not stating that our devices are 100% unhackable or guaranteed secure. If anyone ever tells you that their devices or solutions are guaranteed secure, they don't know much about risk management or security. Walk them out of your office. Key takeaways right at the onset of this webinar. Number one, if there's a single question you can ask yourselves and your teams, the most important question from my perspective is this question: what is my endpoint, both printer and PC, security posture? Meaning, where are the biggest gaps in our infrastructure at the edge, at the endpoint? And candidly, if you can answer this question and can ensure that you and your team are in possession, number one, of a thorough cybersecurity assessment of your endpoints, the risks associated with them, and including attack surfaces and exposure versus your current device configurations and current security posture of those devices. If you have an assessment in hand, feel free to take back the remaining 25 minutes of this webinar. What actions can you immediately take? Number one is to ask the Cobb team to really provide you with a baseline risk and vulnerability assessment. Number two, prioritize risk as it applies to your business. And this is unique to each of you. So really think about which risks that, based on the gaps from the assessment, which risks do you need to close and by when? Right away. And then in your environment, and based on whether you're in healthcare or whatever vertical you're in, assess what residual risk you're willing to accept on an ongoing basis. And it's really critical that you look at these 6 tactical things you can do today. Number one, secure your printer's configurations. Establish those settings on the device, and on our multifunction printers in the enterprise space, you're looking at about 250 plus security-oriented settings on these devices. It's fairly complicated. And so you want to make sure you have a global policy that is in place and deployed at every endpoint. Number two, keep all firmware and software up to date with the latest security fixes. This may, you're doing this all the time with your mobile devices. You're likely doing this all the time with PCs. You have to look at printers as an equal citizen on that network of yours. So it's absolutely critical you keep that firmware up to date. Number three, deploy multi-factor user logins into all 3 devices, operating systems, and applications. Number 4, you want to have a robust print data protection strategy. What does this mean? 2 key things. Number 1, you need a business continuity plan. Back on July 19th, it's likely you were affected by the CrowdStrike / blue screen of death experience that most of us dealt with. Have a business continuity plan and have a disaster recovery plan for your endpoints, not just your core infrastructure. Number 5, offload the burden to your partner. Really, you want to offload and collaborate on the print network and your current print security with the Cobb team, and taking it another step, if you so desire, to engage Cobb for the potential of a continuous monitoring of your environment. And this is really, the key 6 things that you should consider right away. Why should you believe anything we say at HP? Well, it's interesting that we actually have we have well over 20 years of experience in security at the endpoint. And in fact, we have a really great asset in our HP security lab in Bristol in the United Kingdom. And that team there is working on the cutting edge in cryptographic technologies, as well as global threat intelligence that feed from them to both our personal systems group, our PCs, our Poly group for collaboration tools and assets, and our print. And it's a great capability that we're fortunate to have at HP. And I would share with you that we are very closely knit with not only the Department of Defense, the National Security Agency, as well as CISA and NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. We have very collaborative efforts that are happening in real time to help to provide, from an industry perspective, unique insights and technologies that all can share in terms of standards that are being articulated. It's really, when you wake up every morning, whether you believe it or not, you step out of bed and you're in the octagon. And I hate to tell you, but that is the reality. You could be a 10th degree martial arts expert in one of the many martial arts styles around the globe, and you're still going to get hit. The reality is, it's not if, it's when you get hit. How are you going to detect potentially that oncoming strike? Will you parry the strike? Will you step aside? And how will you, most importantly, recover from a strike? That is what resiliency is all about, is knowing how, when you get hit, how you're going to recover. Here's a very sobering reality. This is a real-time threat map showing basically cyber attacks happening in real time as we are sitting here this morning. And you're going to see this goes from everything around the globe, and it's just a reality that, okay, this is not there's not a question of whether or not you're going to get hit. It's just getting more and more intense today, and there's obviously a number of reasons for that. So when you think of security, security is not a product. Security is a mindset. And ask yourselves, when I put these three categories up, where you might fall. Are you security unfamiliar? Are you security aware? Or are you really security insistent in terms of your knowledge and understanding and the processes you have in place in your organization? And then ask yourself, should you revise your mindset moving forward? What are the risks of not doing so? If you find that, well, we're unfamiliar, maybe we're an advertising agency, and it's very unlikely we're going to get we have any data or information that's really of interest. No, what you have is a lot of data and information that is critical to your business, and hence a ransomware attack is something that you really don't want to contend with. You're looking at, on average, about a $4 million negative financial implication, not to even mention the reputational hit you're going to take as well. So think about these three kind of categories of mindset when you kind of look at your overall environment. Let's get into the trends and what we're seeing right now that is really happening. So I've put these into two categories. These are trends, both emerging technologies and emerging threats. And interestingly, yes, AI, of course, is top of mind. Keep in mind that AI is nothing new. AI, from a technology perspective, has been around since the 1950s. I'm not going to get into an academic exercise around explaining AI and machine learning and deep learning and all of that in this webinar. But what I will share with you, it's obviously the buzz today, and everybody, because it's so now obvious the power of AI, when a 5-year-old can type a prompt with text message into a tool that allows them to create this masterpiece from a visual art perspective. It's just the simplicity of that power is really capturing the imagination. So there's no question it's a reset for all of us. And it's important to look at how best to approach AI as it relates to security. Now, it was provocative of us to say initially that this webinar is AI versus security. That is not the reality. It is not this versus this in the octagon. Yes, you're in the octagon, but for security, you want in your corner, you want the current security you have with the people in your security organization and the tool sets they're using. So everything from the endpoint detection and response to the network detection and response to vulnerability and pen testing to the SIM tools, the security incident and event management tools. You want them there, but you take AI, and AI has strengths and weaknesses, and you combine that in a complementary fashion with those people and those processes and tools. And so we're seeing AI obviously acceleration. We're looking end to end. When you're a print vendor, or a PC vendor or a hardware, whether it's a router or a security camera, you need to look to truly secure your customers and your partners. You must look end to end at the very origin of the creation of those devices. If we were to, let's say, source a malware infected component from China and incorporate that in our factory into the printer you buy at the end of this journey, right? This first supply chain journey, that's a problem. And it's absolutely critical that you're working with vendors that have that scope, not only just the very genesis of the device, but all the way to its recycle and its end of life. Absolutely critical, because threats can happen all along that journey. We're seeing a weaponization of AI, and this is just, there's AI for attack, there's AI and offense, there's AI for defense. There's also, and there's a couple other elements I'm going to share in a minute. One of the big, what I call important emerging threats that some of us are starting to talk about, but it is coming down like a bullet train, and it is not too soon to think about, and that is quantum computing. So you ask, well, why do I care about this? Well, what's interesting to know today, everything in the IT space, everything from where there's encryption, it is using the RSA 256 or 152 or or lower, but you want to have 256-bit advanced encryption standard. Well, that with quantum computing power at scale, meaning think of PCs today and the power you have in your laptops. Think back to when it all started with mainframes. Well, that's where we are today with quantum computing. We're in that mainframe stage. It is going to quickly become a computing power and capability in your own laptops in the not too distant future. What does that mean? That compute power can relegate the current encryption standards totally ineffective, which means you're basically a sitting duck. So what do you need to do this, and when is this going to be viable? Like, what do we need to be thinking about, these questions that come up? Well, I'll share with you here the stake in the ground in our cybersecurity industry has really been established by the US government. The Department of Defense, NIST, and CISA and the NSA have articulated a date of 2030 where they are mandating that they will not purchase any firmware of any device or software that the code signing is not what is called post-quantum cryptographically secure. So PQC, post-quantum cryptography. That needs to be present in these devices at a minimum at the BIOS level. Eventually, it will evolve to incorporate, the firmware and the solutions and the interactions from device to cloud and cloud to device. But it is absolutely critical. Now, what's interesting, so you're looking at about a 5-year window right now before you really need to ensure and work with Cobb to say, look, and it's, whatever vendor you're gonna work with in terms of a print OEM. Just ask yourself, okay, do they have the ability to not only have the RSA encryption, but the latest encryption that is post-quantum resistant? So something to think about in your planning right now. I talked about AI and security. So I think it's really important to realize that there's 4 key elements here. There's AI for attack, and the definition is right below it. It's, using AI to turbocharge malware and phishing attacks. It's exactly what we're seeing today with threat actors using generative AI. AI for defense. How can we capitalize on the power of AI to boost detection speed and efficacy, as well as recovery when malware is detected in a device or in the network? Then we have to think about, from an HP perspective and a vendor perspective, well, we need to realize that there has to be security for AI as we're developing the models, the data, and the training of the models on the databases. And then we want to ensure we're following best security practices in the development of that AI. So this is all key, all underlined with ethics and fairness from an AI trust perspective. Now, to give you a couple key stats, this is hot off the press. Data breach victims, the latest self-identified number is quarter over quarter from 23 to 24, an increase of 1,170% of data breach victims claiming, their data and identity has been stolen. More interestingly for business, that phishing attacks have increased 1,265% in the last month, and ransomware attacks have increased well over 76% since the launch of ChatGPT. Okay, so that kind of says it all. Now, interestingly, in July 19th of this year, we had a very interesting experience that we all shared, and I mentioned it earlier. This is what I call the slap heard around the world. Now, let me give you brief context. This slide is showing you the landscape of logos of cybersecurity tool vendors in the multiple security categories of tool sets that they deliver. And clearly, well over 5,000 now today. This is actually a 23 landscape. What has occurred with VCs really seeking greater harvest from their investments, as well as the need for companies to gain and capture greater market share, there's been a massive consolidation. An example of this is the Cisco acquisition of Splunk, and that's just one of many, many, many that are happening. What that has led to is this kind of deliverable of a cohesive, unified platform of cybersecurity capabilities. Think of CrowdStrike, think of Qualys, think of, Splunk is more of just a SIM tool, but you have these vendors that are incorporating the three pillars of a security operations center all in one platform. Well, what occurred was what I call the power slap heard around the world. When the CrowdStrike, and it was not a hack, it was not a threat actor, it was just a file, in error that was incorrectly developed and put out. And the update was connected to the Microsoft infrastructure and just shut everything down. What came of this is just about every board of director, every CISO, CTO, and CIO all immediately became concerned about what we refer to today now as consolidation risk. Single point of failure. They are all migrating to these global platforms that are unified, but now this specter of, how much do we want to take on the risk of one, particular vendor? From an endpoint manufacturer perspective for us, we look at it as a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity for us to help buffer that investment that you're making in those platforms by adding more intelligence from a threat analysis perspective into the devices, and help to buffer some of that, that cybersecurity visibility of threats coming into the infrastructure. So that's some of the things that we're looking at. So as I mentioned, more frequent attacks, more sophisticated attacks, more diverse. To kind of really, I'm kind of trying to scare you here a little bit into the reality of what we're facing. Back a year ago, July, I went on the dark web, and I actually could have, I did not, but I could have purchased a ransomware as a service attack for $100. And all I had to do is point it at an IP address. I didn't even need to know how to code. This kind of capability is packaged now, available for threat actors to use and utilize. And they're fundamentally lazy. They want to go to the weakest point in the network. And so that's a really critical thing to realize, which is why printers are often overlooked. And I want to bring this to your attention that up to 90% of cyber attacks and 70% of data breaches really originate from endpoints. Just real quickly to give you a sense of what cybercrime globally is, if cybercrime was a country, its gross domestic product would be number 2 in the world after the United States next year at $20 trillion. Before China and before Germany, after the United States. A little crazy. I want to share also that, look, firewalls, if you tell me that your printers are secure because they're behind the firewall, no, they're not. Let's just, we can expound upon that if you have questions. But it's just because they're behind a firewall does not mean they're secure devices. 28% increase in average monthly insider-driven data exposure, loss and leak, and thefts events from 2021 to today. And 73% of CISOs expect a major security breach. This is reality. So I'm going to quickly share with you, I have about 5 minutes left, and I want to share with you the journey that you're on and quickly what you need to think about in terms of your print security. So we've broken up the journey that you're on into 3 areas. Number 1, factory to user, then in use in your environment, and then end of use. What's really interesting to note is, as I mentioned earlier, we could source, unfortunately, a malware infected, or whoever your OEM is, could source a malware infected or malicious component and have that in the device. There are things we do at HP that are unique and to our company, including a third-party ISO 2243 supply chain certification. Your vendor should have that. Supply chain and cyber governance at HP is absolutely core to our DNA as a company, and we have the most robust in the industry. I will share with you that if the device then leaves the factory, goes to a distribution center, who's to say a disgruntled employee at the distribution center isn't going to potentially put a USB stick that is malware infected into the device that then ships directly to Cobb, that then goes to you? Well, we have measures in place to protect against those kinds of unforeseen attacks. In the in-use reality you're facing, think of your environment and think of, okay, how do we approach this? Well, number 1, you likely have a hybrid work environment where people are working from home and at the office. You want to view everything as untrusted, and you validate that it is, that they have access to those 3 key things: the device, the operating system, and the applications available to every user. Well, you want to have walk-up authentication at the device to secure multi-factor for the end users. You want to view every connection from a printer or a laptop to the printer as untrusted. So what are you going to do to ensure that those connections are secure and the data flowing from the device to the printer is encrypted and secure? You don't want a man-in-the-middle attack to occur on a TLS 1.2 connection. So even a 1.3, yes, it's more secure, but it's still possible. So and then managing these devices, how can we do and ensure that there's a simple way to manage the policies across our entire print network? Well, all along this experience in use, This is, the reality. You're going to see there are threats. And HP has unique capabilities in our enterprise devices that do a number of things. They continuously monitor for malware. They shut down the device itself and reboots, expunging that malware, all without IT intervention. And then we have Security Manager that allows you to manage the compliance of the devices across the fleet and ensure you can manage and deliver device certificates to that fleet as well. So end of use reuse, really critical that you take steps to return to factory defaults and then do 3x overwrite on hard disk drives and a cryptographic erase for solid state drives. So end to end, this is what you're looking at. And HP does a lot and Cobb does a lot to ensure that we're taking much of this burden off of your shoulders. And to wrap up, I want to share with you a little bit of detail. When you think about purchasing a printer, you want to ask yourselves, well, when are printers most vulnerable? And believe it or not, there are two things you need to consider. Number one, when is the device most vulnerable? Well, it's really during runtime, and runtime, it includes the sleep mode of the device when it's not in use, but it's plugged in, and it's on, but it's in sleep mode, plus the in-use time end users are using it. And what's interesting, if you were to ask when is boot up, how much of the life of the printer is boot up? Well, it's approximately 5% across a 10-year span. 95+% of the life of the printer is happening in sleep mode or in use by the user. The interesting thing is, from an HP perspective, we have built technologies and unique capabilities and we're the only vendor that supports and protects that 95+% of the life of the device. All of our competitors, while we're thrilled that they're making an effort to make you more secure, we honor that and completely support that and want you, because we know you have multi-vendor fleets. And we just want them to come up to snuff, candidly. But what's so interesting is that 95% of the life of the printer is really not protected by other vendors. And we have capabilities in our devices that Cobb and we can help walk you through and give you more insights. So with that, really it's protect your fleet, communicate with Cobb, ask them for an assessment, ensure that they're they're helping you manage the security of your entire fleet.
Thank you, Steve. Definitely appreciate all of that information, and definitely just hearing about how HP has been incorporating AI within the security features and the developments of your products. And thank you for just sharing all of the information on how our customers can help protect themselves and their endpoint. So at this point, we are going to open it up to some questions, and we've had a few come in here, Steve. So let's see here. Looks like the first one is we are a smaller business and we don't have the resources larger companies have. What are the 3 steps that we could take to secure our printers?
Absolutely. And you know what's really interesting is a great question. I want to share with you, the reality is if you're an SMB and you look at an SMB and an enterprise, the threats are exactly the same. You don't have the resources that enterprises have, but you're still dealing with the same threats. And it's it's a challenge. The key is attackers want to find the weakest link in your network. And oftentimes printers are the last thing people think about. And the reason is there's a lot of activity happening in the security space in your company. And you may outsource that to a third party managed security service provider or to a partner like Cobb that is managing the IT infrastructure. Well, the reality is there's fundamentally the things I said at the very onset of this presentation. Number one, make sure you have an assessment done on your fleet. Number two, and the most important thing really is making sure you're running the latest firmware that is supported by your print vendor and is also still, is still being offered, and that you can update it with the latest security fixes. And you need to refresh devices that have either a security that are out of date, no longer supported by the vendor, and even more importantly, if that firmware has a security bulletin assessed against that version. That is a ticket to a nightmare. So ensure that you have that firmware vulnerability assessment done, and call Cobb.
That's right. Yeah, we do use that tool, and it is definitely an important part of our process when we're evaluating our customers' fleets.
Yeah.
So appreciate that. Let's see, we have another question that's come in. How can we streamline security compliance across our printer fleet? I think you mentioned like HP Security Manager. So maybe you could chat a little bit more about that and how that could help with just ensuring that it's across the fleet itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Depending upon what vertical, industry you're in, you're going to have very specific regulatory guidelines and guardrails that you need to adhere to from a compliance perspective. And I will tell you right now, since we look globally at the cybersecurity regulations that are coming down, there's crazy ones coming down in the European Union that we're attending. There's one called a Radio Equipment Directive. I won't go into it, but just suffice to say, this will continue to evolve here in the United States as well. The Security Manager software is an HP software application that is on-premise, server-based, but with a web interface, browser-based interface. It does three key things. Number one, it allows you to create custom policies that you can then deploy across all the HP printers in your fleet. And it ensures that they're following the security policies that you've established as a company. And number two, it helps deploy device certificates for identifying those devices and ensures the security that the devices are, a device that says they're that device, and they are, what it is. And that's critical in a zero trust kind of journey that you're hopefully on, where you are never trusting, but always verifying both the device and the end users in your environment.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
Another question that's come in, what are the different types of attacks that can happen on our printers?
There are about 15, there's a slide I didn't share, but there's one that shows all the vulnerability points on a printer. You've got to remember, printers are, they're laptops that print. I mean, it's incredible. They have a hard drive, they have memory, they're usually connected to the internet. They're just like a laptop or a PC, and it scans and prints and faxes and does the other activities. It also is a core hub of applications that are, streamlining the productivity of your users and the workflows they're doing. So there are quite a number of vulnerability points. Number one, we've even seen people really succumbing to a phishing attack on the printer if they're going into an email account, for example. A scan to email, and they go to the device, they open it, and they are releasing malware unintentionally. We've seen physical injection in a USB stick of malware. We have, I think, more importantly, is the protection of your data and information that is coming to the printer or leaving the printer. And it's important that you're working with a vendor and a team like Cobb who understands the solutions available to you, and that the printer can encrypt that data in transit and at rest direct from the laptop to the recipient device. Because there's things like I mentioned earlier, man-in-the-middle attacks. There are attacks we're seeing there. So phishing attacks. Attackers are looking they're looking at a printer as an entry point, and then they remain dormant under the radar of the existing cybersecurity tools that are at play in the environment. So they sit there, and they can sit there. The average dwell time of a malware attack is around 199 days before it's detected. And it just sits there. And it's important that you have devices that can identify that anomaly in its, either its BIOS or in its firmware, and that it can immediately detect it and recover from it by, the self-healing capability like we have in the HP devices. And it doesn't require a technician to go down and have to deal with it. It happens automatically. So anyway, there are quite a few attacks. Anyway, I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Yeah, we've got a few minutes here. We did have another question drop in. You mentioned printers behind our firewall. Why would they not be secure behind our firewall?
Yeah, it's interesting. We saw that it does. Firewalls can protect most things, not all things. It's that network communication, and what's interesting is about 80% of a lot of data breaches are known to be insider attacks. So, disgruntled employees or someone inadvertently, is most often the case, does something, and a VPN will not protect against anything from inside. And so you've got to be aware, and you can't just say, oh, well, they're secure because they're behind a firewall. I mean, right now, I could go onto one website called shodan.io, and I could show you, I could do a quick search, and I could pull up close to 200 to 500,000 printers and their IP address that are exposed to the internet. So, it's not hard to be a hacker today. You can get access to this, and like I said, they don't want to work that hard. I mean, they're buying other existing malware code from other hackers. That's what the dark web is all about. They're leveraging existing malware, and they're still running malware from 15 years ago. But what's interesting with AI is it's starting to morph that older malware, and what we're seeing is that then converts known malware into zero-day attacks, which are previously unknown because of that AI tweak or morph. And so this just, AI makes it easier for the attackers to do that kind of activity.
Lot to be on the lookout for.
Now, let your
Well,
devices do the looking.
yeah.
And your site security team, of course.
Right. Well, that seems to be all the questions that we have, and we are kind of running up against our time here. But again, Steve, thank you so much. This has been so insightful. We hope that all of you who have joined us today, that you have found this to be helpful. Again, just wanted to remind you that all of our attendees today will be receiving some information where you can download additional information from today's webinar. And if you would like a free security assessment, we would love to do that for you as well. So again, thank you, everybody, and hope you have a great day.
Thank you.